So we're recording.
Okay, I'm just looking over my notes right now. So we had a really good session last night on Tuesday night, Psychedelic Disintegration Group. Um, Several of the folks who regularly attend also attended a breathwork group using not holotropic, holotropic breathwork to sort of
Holotropic.
expand, yeah.
Okay.
And we talked about breath work as a support for the psychedelic experience and also a psychedelic experience in itself. And the three people that went, two of them had a significant breakthrough. Um, I don't know, well, maybe breakthrough is not quite the right word. They had a significant experience. So we're able to come into that sort of space of no being, not in the narrative, not in the biography. Um, one one of our participants in particular talked about pre-birth trauma, um, and then also talked about what's it called, pre-verbal trauma, which is what happens to folks, before they're. It's quite literally what it means, pre-verbal trauma, and being able to access that through the psychedelics and through the use of breath work. And so then we got into this idea of what is the use? Why do we go back into those spaces? Why is it valuable? Is it valuable to go back into the space of trauma or trying to recover trauma? And I think there was what we came to was that sometimes it's essentially important, but often it's not important at all. So I gave the example of someone that I've worked with who had seen a very good psychologist who I recommended, and her advice to this client was to try to find the the trauma, the trauma that had been buried, to find the moment. And what she did is she spent so much of her time in Ibogaine looking for this trauma that never materialized. And she was looking for it as the goal. And therefore, when she didn't find it, she had a sense of failure. And, and I think it lessened the experience. And the point is, if you find it, and if it's there even, because that's the other piece that we talked about, this, well, we didn't finish that. If it's there and if you find it, what is the use of that? Yes, it can be useful, but it can also be damaging. Then we talked a little bit about this idea around trauma, and trauma has become, in my opinion, the sort of go-to, pathology du jour, and it has become um, a pathologizing tool, a tool of pathology, or self-pathology in someone else. And I think there's value in that, but I also think there is a disservice in sort of trying to place everything in the trauma bucket. We are so complicated. It could be brain disease, whatever the fuck that is. But we're also finding out that things like schizophrenia might have something to do with bone marrow, or might have something, some depression might have something to do with what's going on in your gut. So I think we open up wider spaces for healing when we say we don't fucking know. And if we're assigning a narrative to something, but this is the existentialist in me. I'm a psychedelic existentialist. If we're assigning, guys making juice over here, sorry, it's going to make some noise. If we're assigning a narrative to something, the question we have to ask is it useful? I don't even think we need to ask, is it true? I think we need to ask, is it useful? So that was some of the conversation. And then Brian, um, my co-facilitator, Brian Murphy, who co-facilitates the group with me, um, wanted, he brought up this idea of what stance you're taking in a psychedelic experience. And I didn't even know what actually he said stance because he's British and I don't know what the fuck he was saying. And then when he broke it down, I wasn't quite sure. And I think what he was saying is like, what relationship are you taking to what is happening? So, and I think that has to do with, setting and preparation, So if you're going into a traditional sort of Shipibo ayahuasca setting, there's a stance there. And what is your stance within the ceremony? If you're going in to work with a therapist, there's a stance as patient. There's a stance as initiate in a Bwiti experience. So that has a significant relation to, it relates directly to the type of experience you're going to have. So my thinking on that is the stance I want folks to come into a psychedelic experience with is a stance of agency, self-empowerment, and self-love and self-forgiveness. So I think both in therapeutic setting, Western therapeutic setting, and even more so in a shamanistic setting, there is a dismissing of agency. There is a giving over to the healer, in quotation marks. And I still think that it's mainly into you. And then we talked about the stance of surrender, which is a bizarre idea when you're on something like 5-MeO, right? Because if there's no me to surrender to, and there's no place, because you're in some sort of placeless place, then what are you surrendering to? What is the basis of your surrender?
Let me ask you, how do you define surrender? What is
Well,
it?
to me, it's total acceptance, but it's one of those
Acceptance of what?
of
Acceptance
what is,
of what is.
We
As it
surrender to
relates
what
to
is.
you or as it relates to your environment?
I'm sorry, this motherfucker's making juice over here. What'd you say now?
As it relates to you or as it relates to your environment or
It could be
circumstance?
either one. It could be either one. I think in the most healthy sense, when they talk about surrender in recovery, they're talking about a complete giving over to the fact this is what it is. I have this thing that they call addiction in recovery, and I must just surrender to that. That's the truth. There's no denial of it, right? And then there's more of a spiritual, well, that's a spiritual practice, but a Buddhist surrendering to the moment, surrendering to the breath. The problem with surrender in these contexts is that there's often good reason not to surrender. And I don't think surrender necessarily means a better outcome. But we can use, so if you're surrendering to the total fear of an ayahuasca journey, I don't know what that means. And and to do it, if your whole body and your whole spirit and your whole ego, which is a good thing often, it's the only reason you are talking right now, or anyone's watching this, if anyone is. And it's the reason I'll feel bad if no one's watching it, right? And I'll try to do something to make it better. So it's the motivating factor. So if everything's telling you not to, and then to surrender to some scary ass experience, to the medicine, and then you don't, and you come out, and then, well, the reason you didn't heal is because you didn't surrender, which frankly is such a huge crock of bullshit that the shamans lay on people and shrinks lay on people. Fuck that. I mean, you are brought into the setting because of your ego, and meditative practices are ego-based practices. Medicine-based practices are ego-based practices. So yeah. So anyways, and then we sort of came to the idea that these things are a place to explore. And the folks that were doing the breath work, they got into that spaceless space where we could step away. And there is value to being able to come out of your narrative, to being able to come out of your biography when one feels safe. And that is the space where you get to, and all is dissolved. And then what we come to virtually every time we have these groups is, and then to love more. So one of the great things about coming together in a group like that is that there is an energy that happens when people get together. I believe in the commons. I believe in the communal. I'm an anarcho-communist, and communist has the word commons in it. And to have a space where folks can come together and share experiences and energy. And even if it's not processing a particular psychedelic moment, I'll tell you what happened for me. I realized I was having some feuds with some people, not in the psychedelic space, in this space, in the disintegration space, and that I need to amend those feuds. And those feuds had taken place in in social media space. So that was our Tuesday group. Really beautiful and smart, open-hearted people every Tuesday night on 23rd Street, Manhattan.
Okay. Was there one particular person last night that you feel had a particular breakthrough or specific breakthrough that they had been working on in previous session? Some kind of breakthrough for somebody?
I wouldn't call it a breakthrough. I think there was just a deepening of a continual deepening. So no, I wouldn't say there was a breakthrough.
Okay. And now, do you also think that the community, the people, because you mentioned the community, that you think that the sense of people being together, working together, being in a similar environment, meaning this environment of experiences that brought them to where they were, you think that that has just as much of a healing as the
Well, absolutely. We're pack.
technique?
We're pack animals. We do not heal by ourselves. We do not
Yeah, I
heal
think that's what I was getting at. It's talking about the tribe.
I think to come together, particularly around this sort of esoteric knowledge, and to find folks that you can talk about it and talk about little aliens visiting your brain and or pre-verbal trauma. I mean, that's not a conversation you're going to be able to spike up where most people, first of all, would understand it, or if they didn't understand it, would be interested to learn what it is.
So the common experience, people coming together.
Yeah, the common space. Yeah, the commons.
All right. And then you mentioned earlier in the talk that women that in the group thought that she experienced a failure. Did you agree with that?
I'm sorry, I missed part of that. The experience of.
If I understood you right, the woman in the beginning, you said the woman you talked about in the beginning, you mentioned that she viewed her experience with the ibogaine as a failure because she didn't achieve exactly what she was trying to.
She wasn't in the group. She wasn't in the group, but we recontextualized that.
Okay.
So she wasn't in the group. I was using that as an example, but we recontextualized that, and I think that's important to recontextualize, and that's what narrative can do. I don't think there is a true narrative. I don't think the narrative is true, but I think you can make the narrative true to yourself.
So then you would say that it wasn't a failure, even if she.
No. I think the treatment was very. But that aspect, she's in there going around looking for the moment of trauma. I mean, why?
Yeah. So.
I mean, I get why, but if it doesn't happen, then there's issues.
Okay. All right. So, and then the Hall of thing, that's part of the therapy also. I mean, I don't really know a whole lot about
it. People can access that we're in New York, so we're lucky, and there's plenty of breathwork groups. But folks were just talking about using that as support, post psychedelics or in between psychedelics, or just to deepen the psychedelic life.
Yeah, well, I've heard that people actually can have a psychedelic experience through only holotropic.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's why Stan Grof came up with it. He wanted a low threshold, legal way to access these spaces. I can remember my first out of body psychedelic or drug experience, if you will. I'm using the term, other than the rush I would get from being around little girls as a little boy, was breathing really, really hard, really fast, holding your knees, and then one of the kids would come up and squeeze you really tight until you started getting fuzzy in the head, and then you would drop to the ground. And I just wanted to do that all. You did the same shit?
I remember doing that.
Yeah. And I highly recommend it for children. But I was the one that wanted to go over and over and over again. So that was a
is
different
it true
look.
that you can get similar effects through holotropic breathing as you
Absolutely.
do with using DMT?
Absolutely. And other breathing techniques that I can't think of the name of either. There's absolutely, you absolutely can. And you can get those effects through a yoga practice, through marathon running, through sax. You can get some of it. My teacher, my real true teacher in Bwiti, the one that I respect the most, Papa Andre, used to say, if you want to see the Bwiti, you need to eat the wood, eat the iboga. And what he was saying was, for that particular experience of the oneness or psychedelia or God, that you need to eat iboga to get to that particular way. So in order to get a DMT experience, you need to smoke DMT. In order to get some sort of, yogic, tantric high, you need to go tantra or yoga. So, but we're kind of going for the same fucking thing.
Yeah.
But you can get that in a ecstatic church, Christian church. You can get that. You can get that,
So there's
Sufis,
lots of different ways
Yeah.
to achieve similar results.
Shake your money maker. Shake your money maker.
All right, that sounds really good. So it sounds like you had a good session last night, and there'll be another session next Tuesday night.
Next Tuesday, every Tuesday, 7 o'clock.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm going to end the recording here.
Okay, cool.